And joining us back on the Chibok school abduction story is a mental health advocate, Angela Umoru. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, do you think the reintegration of some of these girls back to their families, do you think it has also given them some sort of closure, or there should be more that should be done in terms of should I say mental what do you call it?
Services.
Yes, for these children that were returned back to their parents.
Absolutely. I think that now that we're looking 10 years out, 10 years after the incident, I think this is a good time to also look back, reflect, and to also draw some learnings from the entire incident. That was the very first time that we're having a mass abduction of that nature. We didn't think something like that could happen. Now, there were so many things that without even all of us in the mental health space believe that we're not done properly. There were no psychosocial, at least that we know of, no psychosocial services were deployed to the children who were released or those who managed to escape. Now, looking at, for example, the BBC interview that was done of one of the former abducted girls, Amina, her name was Amina, interviewed. One of the things I remember that she was saying in that interview was how there hasn't been good reintegration. Like, people look at a child and then there's that discrimination, there's lack of inclusion.
Stigmatization.
Exactly, that stigmatization. So that's definitely a huge gap. And thinking about this, and even in the light of, let's say, the mental health bill or act now, it's no longer a bill that was signed in January 2023, you would expect that, okay, we didn't do this 10 years ago, but the next best time to do something right and to get it right is today. We didn't do it last year. The next best time is today. So there are definitely, there's a need for counseling for all of these abducted, the girls that have returned, even for the community, even for the family as a whole. I thought it's so easy to assume that, oh, only the girls went through something, but then you also have the community members as a whole. There's that general trauma. So there should be even some level of community level intervention as well that should have been done. So there's a huge gap there, definitely a huge gap.
So I wanted to, when you spoke about the fact that, there should be some things that should be done to the community at the community level, and of course the parents.
Yes.
Let's even talk about the parents, for example. The children are not the only ones who suffer the mental health.
Yeah.
And mental health, to a large extent, is something that if you're not mentally stable, your emotions cannot be stable.
Yes.
So how do you think what ways do you think this can be done, if the children are being taken care of in terms of mental health? What about the parents of the children? How do we address that issue?
Also, I think, is it not too late?
Too late.
10 years.
Oh, that's a very valid question, actually. And it's so easy to, again, assume, 10 years have passed. Nigerians are resilient. Come on, you can get off it and come out of it and all of that. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of these effects are enduring. Trauma responses could take many, many years before they even show up. And in speaking about the parents, as you have mentioned, there was a need that before they were even reunited, at that point, there should have been some level of preparation. Now, you've not seen your child for X number of days, X number of weeks, X number of years. This is what you could possibly expect. There was a need for that preparation. Now that it hasn't even been done, there's also the fact that a lot of them, some of these girls are coming back with children. How do you look at that child and accept that child as your grandchild? There was also a need for that, because some of the conditions that we need to, I'm not a psychologist, I'm an advocate, but even as an advocate, I can say that some of the conditions that we should have watched out for as a society are things like mood disorders, like bipolar disorders that could have arisen, depression, anxiety disorders, PTSD, major one, right? Exactly. So these are things that we should have been aware of. Again, I am bringing it back to the law that was enacted last year, early last year. If it's one thing to sign things into law, it's another thing to follow through. That's very important, right? So if we said that within the Ministry of Health, there should have been as the law stipulates now, there's supposed to be a mental health services department that should have been created. Now, question is, where are we on that? Now, this is an opportunity where they could have come in and said, okay, we have noticed that this is a gap that we ought to fill. So again, it's one thing to sign something into a law, it's another thing to see it through, and this is the perfect opportunity for that law to have had its light, its day in the light, so to speak.
Do you think, you mentioned quite a lot of things, and it keeps me wondering if we as Nigerians actually take mental health seriously. I mean, for the Chibok girls that returned, there were some that saw people die in captivity.
True. There
were some that saw even their children that they gave birth to died in captivity, molestation, and the like. Some even had Stockholm syndrome. They became sympathetic to their captors. How do we as Nigerians, or as a mental health advocate, how do you think we can provide more awareness on mental health generally?
Thank you. And to even add to that, there's also the aspect of another aspect where I don't think we often realize, which is even as the mother, to give birth to a child that is born or conceived within the circumstances of that issue. That's another form of trauma that we're not even considering. Now, on whether or not there's a lot we're doing enough as a country, the reason I smiled is because I was just thinking to myself is that we have a long way to go. Yes, we are grateful to the fact that we have come this far as a country, that at least there are more people talking about it. It's no longer a taboo topic in that essence. I mean, we're here on national television talking about mental health. So that's a good step, right? But there definitely has to be, there's a lot more to be done. For example, we still know that the ratio of psychologists that we have in this country to the entire population of the country is way too low. We definitely need to have more specialists in this regard. And one way I think that we could even do better in that regard is to also create specialized pathways. So, for example, well, a few months ago, the government talked about giving student loans. Another thing that we could also think about is what are the areas, what are the courses of study that actually need more people to go into? So, for example, psychology is one of those areas. What if the government then decided that, okay, as we're giving out student loans, we could also concentrate on this area? That way, there will be more people that could go into the field. So that's one practical thing that we could do.
I think to a large extent, is one of the things that, mental health is so very paramount. Aside from the fact that the Chibok girls issues, a lot of Nigerians actually, some persons suffer from emotional trauma. And I think that if that is not being dealt with, a whole lot of things will go wrong in the society. How do you think that we need to start looking at, how do you think we need to start looking at that, most especially, just in 30 seconds, emotional trauma that has to do with mental health in 30 seconds?
Okay, let me try and put all of that together. So I think, first and foremost, the role of the media is already helping. Then another thing I believe that we could do differently is also support organizations that are already working in that space. So again, partnerships and collaborations with the media is paramount. So because you're giving me 30 seconds, I'm going to stop here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Advocate Angela Umoru David, thank you very much. And that's it on Chibok SchoolGirls. Now we have joining us a former commissioner in Delta State between 2000